Welcome to another exciting episode of Submission Radio Australia. I'm Dennis Gradov. I'm here with Kasper Ozlowski. It's the 29th of June, and we have a special MMA threesome planned for you.
Threesome? Well, I think it's more like a fivesome, Dennis, because it's you, me, and then you've got Bas Rutten, Urijah Faber, and Paul Daley. So we're not exactly short on the big names today. We've got a lot to talk about. Obviously, we're going to be interviewing all three of the guys. Paul Daley, he's been in the news a lot. We want to know what exactly is happening and when we can expect him back in the UFC. Urijah Faber's got a fight coming up. We want to know what exactly is happening to him. And full contact skydiving, what the hell is that all about? And then, of course, Bas Rutten. I mean, I don't think he's ever done a boring interview in his life.
That's right. He's going to stop by. He's going to share some stories. We'll talk a little bit about World Series of Fighting. They're doing a lot of exciting stuff. And just to get the housekeeping out of the way, if you haven't yet, check us out on YouTube, youtube.com/submissionradio.au. A lot of great stuff there. Some videos me and Cass have done, including an interview with Robert Whitaker, some EA UFC stuff, and a lot of stuff always popping up there. And, of course, the show is available on Stitcher, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, the BlackBerry Market, and our Twitter page, which is the best place for you to reach us and let us know what you really think about the show. That's twitter.com/submissionaus.
There you go, guys. Always fun stuff to check out. And, of course, we're going to be breaking down UFC Fight Night Auckland, or 43 as it officially is. But without further ado, guys, I think it's time to get cracking and get our first guest on. He's obviously got a fight against Alex Caceres coming on, so we definitely want to get his thoughts on that and as well as a lot of other things.
Our next guest is a legend in the bantamweight division and a UFC veteran. He's fighting at UFC 175 against Alex Caceres. Ladies and gentlemen, Urijah Faber is on Submission Radio. Urijah, welcome to Submission Radio.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me.
Oh, well, it's an absolute pleasure. Now, Urijah, before we get into the meat and bones of the interview, when I first saw full contact skydiving, I thought it was a bit of a prank. Didn't realize it was real. Then I watched the video, and I was blown away. Tell us a little bit about what full contact skydiving is and how you're involved in it.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that, man. That thing's been taking off like wildfire. They just basically brought me in to help coach up the guys. I got to go in the simulator and do a little simulated diving myself and meet some of the guys that are serious about it. And it's pretty crazy, man. They have that's a whole different animal. I myself will never be doing that, I don't think.
Yeah, it's kind of like you've got skydiving. It's like MMA meets the Matrix, and you're a part of it. So tell us, how exactly did you get a part of it, and just tell us a little bit more about full contact skydiving for those people who don't exactly know what it is.
I just basically I had seen a little bit about it, and kind of got a little more intrigued. I talked to a guy who was involved, and I was helping him out first, and then I decided, hey, let's go ahead and get a little more involved and start holding classes for a couple of the guys, and then they brought me on for this particular fight. And the simulator, I mean, it's a whole different animal. There's a different way of like maneuvering, and it's kind of like, I try to do what I can to help out, but it's just kind of a wild thing in general.
Yeah, I mean, you're fighting in the air, which is good, because that, my biggest complaint about skydiving was that it was, far too safe and relaxing. I think I drank a cup of tea. I think I drank a cup of tea on my way down when I went. But in all seriousness, there is a level of danger that goes with full contact skydiving. To all the people that are already shaking their sticks in the air, what safety measures have these guys, come up with when they're obviously executing a, air MMA fight?
Well, I mean, the theory is, and it's like I said, it's so new. I don't think that there's been any deaths as far as I know. Of course, this has probably been going on, for underground for more than most of us know. But they have the time shoots that open up, and after a certain time limit, they have to stop fighting anyways. And they have a referee out there who can catch as well. And now with the head, the helmets, and the protective gear, it's really hard to get a knockout, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
So it's pretty intense.
It's pretty crazy, and I would have come up with snakes and ladders up there in the air because it's just a strategy game. But I'm excited to see what happens with it. Now, Uriah, the other people are shaking their sticks in the air recently because your bout has been put on the prelim cards for UFC 175. Tell us a little bit about this, and what were your thoughts when you found out?
You know what? For me, it actually makes a little more sense. It's the main event on the free card, the Fox Sports 1 card. So, I think as far as exposure goes, I'll be probably to a wider view, the more viewers, the guys that don't have to pay it. I think the pay-per-view numbers haven't necessarily been high like they used to be. So, for me, it makes more sense. I'm the featured fight on the free card right before the pay-per-view. And I don't get a piece of that pay-per-view anyways, so I'd rather have more people watching the fights.
You know what? You pretty much answered my next question, because I was going to say, obviously, the fight fans are happy because everybody gets to watch you for free who isn't maybe necessarily going to get the pay-per-view. But yeah, in terms of, like, does it affect you in any way, in a monetary way, like sponsors or pay-per-view points or anything like that, no?
No, I'd much rather. I actually asked to be on the the main event of the free card because that's a fight that everybody's going to see for free. Even all the cheapskates aren't going to be able to watch the pay-per-view card. So for me, it makes more sense to get the exposure because it doesn't affect me either way as far as pay goes.
The cheapskates win again.
The one thing that's going to be a little awkward is that first off, I've never been on a prelim, so I have to report a little bit earlier when I'm prepared for that, and the second thing is it's earlier in the night, so I usually adjust my sleep schedule to sleep in a little bit longer, so I'll be adjusting that as well. And then the last thing will be a lot of times, especially in Vegas, people start stumbling into the fights when the main event starts, so people have to make shake off the Vegas rust and get in early to catch my fight this time. But again, it's for the bigger picture of getting in front of a lot of eyes, which is more important to me than the idea of being on a pay-per-view. Because the idea of being on a pay-per-view is not the same as millions of people watching at home. That's more valuable to me.
You're really becoming like the people's champion. I was gonna say, me and Dennis, we love to sleep in, so we would have to be main event fighters, only the main events.
Yeah. What time are the fights going to be on over there in Australia?
I think 12 p.m. or 2 p.m. It's usually around 12 or 2 p.m. in Australia, and prelims around about 10 a.m.
Everybody's in the pub at 10 a.m. drinking beer. It's awesome.
Yeah.
It sounds good. You Australians know how to do it, man.
Oh, yeah. Beer is breakfast, basically. But I was going to ask you, in terms of Alex Caceres, he's obviously made a big turnaround since The Ultimate Fighter, and you're obviously a veteran. The only knock on this fight is that people are saying Alex Caceres maybe isn't necessarily ready for you, and you're far too experienced for Alex. What are your thoughts on the matchup?
I think it's, people are privy to what they know, and I've been around a lot longer than he is, but I'm not sure how many guys are on a 5-fight win streak in the UFC, and I know that he's big for the weight class. I think he was on The Ultimate Fighter at 155 pounds. So, to me, I don't take this guy lightly at all. He's got some finishes. He's got an exciting style. He's got the reach advantage on me. He's a younger guy, so he obviously doesn't have the name necessarily. But, people don't understand this is a fight. It's between two guys that are the same size, that are both training in the same discipline. So, I expect to win. I always expect to win. I expect to go in and finish him, but I'm sure he's expecting the same. So for me, I try to keep it as simple as possible. It's two guys going after each other, trying to do bodily harm. So, I'm taking it very seriously. I think he's tough. He just beat Sergio Pettis, who, in my opinion, is one of the top up-and-comers out there. And so, that says a lot. He finished him.
Now, obviously, you mentioned that Alex is tough, and if you do get past Alex, you're in an interesting conundrum because you fought a lot of the guys in the bantamweight division. Have you sort of thought about who you'd want to fight next? Obviously, Dominic Cruz is going to be back in the mix soon. You've had a couple of fights with Renan Barão. I'm sure you wouldn't mind fighting him again. And then, of course, TJ's the champion. Who would you want to fight if you do get past Alex at UFC 175 next?
That's a good question. I think there's some interesting fights out there for TJ. So, I don't see that fight between us happening. We basically fight all the time in the gym, but it's not on that main stage with the intent to kill. So, yeah, the fight with TJ, I don't want that fight to happen. It doesn't need to happen, especially anytime soon. I think Rafael Sunsao, and we're talking about a rematch with Hanan Barral for him, and the Dominic Cruz fight. So I think there's a lot of guys out there for me to fight. I even heard some rumors of Kid Yamamoto wanting a fight with me, and I've got my fight now that I'm focusing on, and that's the most important fight for me. There's the Cruz fight for me. There's another Barral fight for me. There's a lot of fights out there. If Rafael gets a shot here soon, that's a guy that I have a win against, so that's an interesting fight. There's a lot of options out there. I'm just going to keep doing my thing and having fun and put my best foot forward.
Okay, well that's good. I guess the other big question is obviously there's fights in a bantamweight division for you, but ultimately, obviously TJ's holding the title, and again, much congratulations to him. What about as far as title aspirations go? Do you think about going to 45, or what's the deal with that?
No, I'm just gonna. If there's an interesting fight that they want me to fight, 45 maybe, but I don't like to think too far ahead like that. I'm going to focus on Alex Gutierrez. If I do what I believe I can and finish him, I'll look for the next matchup. But I just want to stay busy. And like you said, I've fought most of the guys in the top 10 in our weight class. So, I'm just going to stay busy and see what these guys have for me.
And, obviously you've had a very interesting relationship with Dominic Cruz. Before you finish out your time in the UFC, way down the line, is that an important fight that you want to have a rematch of before you get out of the UFC?
It's not like a make or break for me, but I would like to have that fight. He's a guy that has had some real bad luck. I'm hoping that he heals up and can make a go at it. I believe that the champion. It's a mindset thing. It's not a body thing. So if he can get his body, healed up, I think he'll still be a top contender. And I'm not sure if he'll have me fight him right away or he'll get a shot at TJ right away or what the deal will be. But it's definitely a fight I'd like.
And just another question I wanted to ask you, Uriah. Obviously, in your last fight, there's a bit of controversy to the finish. Do you know who the official is, who the ref will be that's obviously going to be reffing the fight between you and Bruce Leroy?
I have never looked in advance on a thing like that, so I don't really have any kind of clue. If it is Herb Dean, I would hope that he learned his lesson last time and he lets the fight play out. So even if it were him, I wouldn't have a problem with it. I just it was unfortunate that last go around, that last fight was it really was unfinished. So, I didn't want to bitch and complain too much, but it was definitely something that I wasn't happy about.
So you're right. We're going to do, obviously, what's called the tap-out round. Obviously, you've been on the show before. You know what it's all about. Fire off a bunch of questions at you, and you tell us the first thing that comes to your mind. Are you ready?
Okay, let's do it.
All right. Does Urijah Faber get a large popcorn meal when he goes to the movies?
Of course.
Now, you're an entrepreneur, and you've got things like the memory tag, your businesses. You're now part of Full Contact Skydiving. So Submission Radio R&D department has come up with 3 products for you that could be a no-brainer for you to bring out next. All right, so we want you to choose the one that you think is going to be the best and the one that you want to bring out next, okay?
Okay.
Okay, so you've got the Urijah Faber wig hat. It's a wig, it's a hat, it's made from 100% recycled materials, and runs on low emissions. Number 2, the Team Alpha Male scented training cards with authentic sweat smells and a piece of hair from every member on the team. And number 3, of course, is the Urijah cheese snacks. There's 5 crackers, authentic aged cheese slices, and the selling slogan will be, "Tap out to the deliciousness with the Urijah's cheese snacks." Which one do you choose?
Let's see. I like the wig. The wig would be good, but can we get a chin strap on it with a butt chin?
Of course. It might dip into the high emissions, but that's okay. We'll get the guys to work on it. Now, you're right, Faber. Next question. Is there such thing as a bad pizza?
A bad pizza? I think so. I'm not a huge pizza fan myself. I like pizza if I make it myself. Other than that, I'm not a huge fan.
Without thinking, Uriah, tell us who's going to be the next striking coach at Team Alpha Male.
Martin Kampman, maybe, but he's more of an MMA coach. We'll see.
Okay. First meal you eat after a weight cut?
I have a homemade potato and turkey tacos, and then I have another meal after that.
Nice.
Bananas are badass. Do you agree or disagree?
Is me being a badass?
Bandanas are badass. Do you agree or disagree?
Depends who's wearing them.
Okay. How many headbands do you own, Uriah?
I've owned a lot throughout the years, but they call me the California Kook because I lose everything. So, as of right now, I probably have maybe 5, but I don't know where they are.
In your opinion, would Dana White look better with a beard?
It depends if he's skinny or fat. He goes through little swings. If he's chubby, I think you can cover up the extra chin with a beard. When he's all fit, he looks pretty good, though.
Now, Uriah, what's the highest weight you've ever been at?
I hit 164 for a few hours, and I had my hand broken and casted, and I was lifting a lot, and I felt horrible. I ended up sleeping like 12 hours, and I lost 6 pounds overnight. Then I was back down to about 158. So 164, though, I hit it for a second.
Wow.
It's on record now. And finally, Uriah, what drives Urijah Faber in his fighting career in the second part of 2014?
Just to have fun and to keep winning. I think it feels good to get out there and have the reward of victory after a lot of years of hard work. So I feel like I've gotten to a point where it's just time to collect the W's after all the years of discipline and getting this technique up.
There it is. All right, guys, so don't forget to catch Urijah Faber against Alex Caceres, also known as Bruce Leroy, on the main event of the UFC 175 prelims. That is on July 5th, Mandalay Bay, Las Vegas. And, of course, for all you Aussies, that's July 6th on that sweet, sweet Sunday. And follow him at Urijah Faber on Twitter. Urijah, thank you so much for being on the show again.
My pleasure, guys. Thank you.
Certainly excited to see what Urijah Faber does in the bantamweight division, and for his fight at UFC 175, always a fun interview. And Cass, speaking of fun interviews, we've got a good one coming up next.
Yeah, we do. This man has been on Submission Radio before. I think if you know anything about MMA, you're going to know this guy. I think even if you don't know anything about this guy, you've seen his videos. They go a little bit like, bang, bang, dangana, dangana, dangana. And, here at Submission Radio, we're always big fans, and it's going to be great to have him back on Submission Radio.
That's right. If there is an ambassador for Submission Radio out there in the MMA world, I think this man could be him. And without further ado, let's get right into it. Let's get right into this interview.
All right, guys, our next guest is one of the biggest MMA legends and personalities in MMA today. He is a former UFC heavyweight champion. He is the handsome one. He is El Guapo, Bas Rutten. Bas, welcome back to Submission Radio.
Yeah, hey, glad to be here.
Excellent, and we're always stoked when you come on. Now, let's get to the tough questions straight away, Bas. You posted a picture of yourself after dinner last night, the other day. How was it? What did you eat?
Oh, a lot of food. At that particular, what was it? Ossobuco. I ate ossobuco and a lot of food. But a friend of mine made the same picture, and he says, "Look at how it looks, like how big I am." And I say, "My God, how is that possible?" He says, "Oh, it's the camera angle if you hold it low." So I hang my belly out, and it looks like really ballooned up, or that you even put a pillow under it. It's the craziest angle that you do. It's awesome.
Nice. Now we know what to do every time we take pictures of food and with us and post them to Twitter.
There you go. Make it a nice selfie. We'll call it a Belfie or something.
Yeah. Patent pending.
He's still in shape, everyone. Now, Bas, we thought you might have been putting on some weight because at the moment you're shooting Paul Blart Mall Cop 2. Is that right? And how's that going?
It's going great. We're having a lot of fun here. I'm actually have the last shooting day tomorrow, and Thursday I'm back home. So I've been here off and on since May 1st in Vegas. Stayed here for like 4 weeks straight, and then I started going back and forth. And I had to do a lot of stuff. My daughter's graduation, had a graduation speech, had a meeting here, meeting there. So with the car blasting upside down, and the last few weeks, I think I've been about 4 times back and forth each week. So that's a lot.
Now, before we get to this graduation speech, because I'm sure it was amazing, this is the second movie that you've done with Kevin James. And people may not know this, but you were a part of his show King of Queens for a couple of episodes as well. What's Kevin like to work with? And is he a big fan of MMA? Obviously, he did the big MMA movie with you a while back. And how much does he know about MMA? Is he any good?
Yeah, no, he knows everything about MMA. He and Joe Rogan used to watch Pancras fights when they were, when they were roommates. This goes all the way back. And so when I came to America, I think within 3 months I had a phone call from his management. They said, "Hey man, we would like to meet you, to train." And that's how it started. We became instant friends. So I know him 17 years. We've been doing a lot of little projects here and there. Even with his brother, we did a whole webisode series with his brother Gary. Also comedy. It was also fun. And then, like you said, King of Queens. I've been in the first Mall Cop. I was a zookeeper. I was the wolf. I played the voice of the wolf. So every time he gets me in his movies, it's awesome. It's always a great time to hang out with him and his whole gang, because he's got all these comedians around him. And it's just laughing. You laugh a lot and you have a lot of fun. What's not to like? And they pay you on top of it. It's an amazing job.
Yeah. Now, Kevin James is a funny guy. Obviously, he did Grown Ups and Grown Ups 2. I remember in Grown Ups, he was wearing a City on Tong shirt. But did you know this? Did you know that at one pay-per-view, he tapped out Rampage in between a fight? So technically, he is in the lineage for light heavyweight champion. Did you know this?
I didn't know that yet. I don't know if he can make 205. He was all the way down to 216 when he did Here Comes the Boom.
Yeah.
And, he's been doing it for a long time. And listen, everything that you saw in Here Comes the Boom, when you see him punching, that is not sped up. It's not, it's all his own speed and power. This guy is a really powerful guy. Also, the slam at the end of the movie, I always tell these people, because, some people, when he lifts Krzysztof Szczecinski, when he lifts him up, you have people in the audience started laughing like, yeah, right. Well, he did this in front of all the extras there. And he says, guys, we're going to use a cable in a bit, but I just want you guys to see this. So he told Krzysztof to get him in an armbar, and he just lifted him up, brought him above his head, put him back, and then he lifted him again up. He says, I just want everybody to know that I can really do this before people are going to say, oh, it's because of the cable. So he's very strong. He's a very powerful guy.
Well, it's good that you brought up that movie, because I was going to ask, that victory dance that you do in the movie, where did the inspiration come from? Is that your real victory dance?
No, it wasn't. The script asked for a crazy dance, and in Holland you have these. They call them gabbers, and these are all bald guys, and they go out and they dance on the music, like the crazy music, and that's the kind of dance they do a little bit, like really weird. They flip the hips forward backwards on the feet, and I go, man, that will be it. I think that's the crazy dance. So I just watched a bunch of videos like that. And then I start putting one together.
Now, Bas, obviously you mentioned the graduation speech. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it was not like at the graduation. It was like a week before. They, they keep the kids busy. They do a barbecue all day, and then they have people coming in. And every year they had some guys, police officers come in. But if here's a police officer, tell them not to do drugs and don't drink, then it never has as much effect, I think, as when you have a guy who's been there, who's been crazy, and who's, they just saw a video clip. So I had 3 other kids. I started off with a clip of me fighting, and then you see me doing Cartoon Network, and little clips here, Punk Payback, and of course little parts of the movie, and then Inside MMA on Access TV. So, and then I started telling him about my life, that I went through a lot. I was a very sick kid. I had horrible skin disease, very bad asthma. I didn't have a lot of friends. I got bullied, and then, but I realize now, being at this age, that all these, God gave me those, diseases at the time, and I saw it as a bad thing. But I always think, would I have become a fighter if I wouldn't have had eczema and asthma, as hard, as heavy as I had it, because, they were always picking on me. So I wanted to start paying back, and then finally I got in a fight with the biggest bully in town. But, now I was training for 6 weeks or 2 months at Taekwondo, and I knocked him out. And, and then every time when I tell a story like that, I tell these guys, what did you learn here? Okay, so first of all, you learn people only go as far as you let them, And I'm saying, I don't mean start knocking people out. I'm not saying that. You guys are young adults, you should do it with talking. But people will always push. You have always these bullies around, and they will keep on pushing. But if you stop them right away from the first time on, you say, listen, I don't like it when you talk to me like that. Most of the time they move on to somebody else. And then I tell them about other bullies in life, which is alcohol and drugs. These are all same things. They pick out the weak people. And if you're weak and the bully sees that, he grabs you, and as long as you can control it, then it's okay. But once it starts controlling you, you're having a problem. And I touched very light on those things. I think if I'm going to keep it too much, if I give it too much talk, it's like a used car salesman. If it's good, it's good. I don't need to keep on talking. But I figured, if I let them see it as a bully, as it works, then hopefully they're going to realize, wait a minute, yeah, it does have a control over me. Because I do know that a lot of these kids already have a problem. They go drunk to school, and not drunk to school because they want to be drunk at school. They go drunk to school because they just want to feel normal again because they're alcoholics already. And we're talking about 17, 18-year-old kids. It's a very sad thing. So that means they've been driving drunk, a lot of heroin has been doing, it's a very scary world out there now for the kids. So, and I just talk about my life experience. And then every time, I come back to it. I say, well, omens, you can train everything. Everything is a habit. If you have a bad habit, you got to make it into a good habit. And I went from when I was a little kid all the way till what I am now. And then all the life lessons on the way I talked about.
Very, very nice, Bas. And apparently, there's been reportedly a lot more knockouts in the area since your speech. So I think you did a very good job.
As long as it's bad guys, that will be good.
Bad guys are going down. Bad guys are going down. Bas, speaking of drugs, there's been a lot going on in MMA now that TRT is made illegal. And one of the results of that is Chael Sonnen suddenly retiring due to the issues that he had to come off TRT. What were your thoughts about this situation?
What I think of that situation?
Yeah, Chael Sonnen retiring, obviously, and him having to retire because of it.
Well, yeah, it's smart because he couldn't do it without it anymore, and his own production is really low right now. So he just made a decision. He says, listen, I know it was on the list, but I do have to use it if I want to have kids, So I guess that he had to make a big choice, and there was no more fighting, And that's a heavy one for a fighter, especially for guys who can talk as he does, because I guarantee you he was going to make a lot of money on that fight. And so is Wanderlei Silva. So I think that once you need TRT, you shouldn't fight anymore. You should stop. It is illegal. It is pushing it. They allow you 4 times the amount, and in some states even 6 times the amount as a normal person. So then you 4 or 6 times you have more in your system than a normal person. You can't tell me that it's not cheating. If they can bring it up to a level of 1,000, what apparently everybody has, or around that, between 500 and 1,000, and you stay under that, still, it's not your own body. But then I can understand, Or once you start saying, to 4 or 6 times more, and then guys getting clocked with 16 times the amount, I go, dude, what are you taking? That's got to be an insane amount, So I think it's time for you to hang it up. So, that means that if you get caught, that you just used something at that moment. And so if you get a P-test back and it's high, well, that means that you're within 5 days of there, you probably use something. You know, and then I go like, okay, as a fighter, once you have to start sitting up like a week before the fight, that to me, that sounds insecurity. You know, that's why I always said, you don't need it. What's on top of everything? Just be happy with yourself. You know, I think that you can look at yourself in the mirror if you're a champion and can say, hey, yeah, I did this by myself. I did this alone, without any help. You know, the worst excuse is always what I said, that people say, yeah, but everybody's probably doing it. Well, you know, that's so sad. That's the same with people who throw cigarettes out their windows. Yeah, I did that because everybody's doing it anyway. You know, that's such a poor excuse. Just don't do it.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Obviously, as fight fans, it's sad to see Chael go away, but I guess he did what he had to do. But I was going to talk to you about some fighters that obviously haven't gone anywhere. World Series of Fighting 10 recently passed. Title fights galore at World Series of Fighting 10. Who would you say are the standout performance of the night for you?
Glenn, of course. I thought that was an amazing fight against Kanyan. I mean, he didn't even get tired. I mean, when he walked back in the first round, we looked at him and thought, hey, he's not even breathing, this guy. You know, and it was so like, he went so out of control and full over. You can really tell he trains with all these guys at Pettis' gym, at Luke Wolf's gym, you know, and he trains with all these guys the way he escaped the armbar and escaped the knee bar, you know, and the power and the distance he had. I was really impressed with him. You know, but I think on the main card, Jessica Aguilera, I thought she was doing an amazing job. You know, I used the same analogy there also. I said, well, she was hitting us so hard so many times. I said, it's a 5-round fight. Let's hope she's not going to run out of gas. How many times do you see that? The guy turns, or a girl, to somebody gives their opponent a beating, and then after 3 rounds they start wearing down, and suddenly the opponent comes back. You know, so we were kind of, you know, also with Glenn, we thought that, is she going to punch himself out? What if he cannot finish this round? Is she going to be okay in the 3rd round? You know, these are all questions because it's 5 rounds. And it was just purely in the fight.
Absolutely, Bas. And obviously, you know, there's a really big World Series of Fighting event, the World Series of Fighting 11 coming in July, early July. There are a lot of great matchups in that one. What's one of the fights that you're looking forward to the most?
Yeah, there's got to be the Newell and Gaethje fight. You know, that fight to me, I think, is going to be a badass fight. Newell by now he proved everybody that he's for real, and you got to really watch out for him. And there's a lot of respect between the both of these guys. I like both of these guys, great fighters. You know, this is one of those fights that for me it's okay to go to it all. Unfortunately, since it's for the belt, that's not going to happen. And somebody probably is going to get knocked out or choked out. You know, and I say that because if it's a knockout or with leg kicks or something, probably Gaethje, because of his striking, it's crazy striking. And, you know, the submissions from Nick, you know, it's so tight, it's just very hard to escape. And he gave him one little neck or one little heel or whatever it is, you're going to have a problem.
Now, Bas, I was going to ask you, you know, it seems that every week, every 2 weeks, there's always controversy in every event. We actually had Big John McCarthy on the show last week, and we were speaking to John about the eye poke issue in MMA. One of the issues that John brought up is obviously that it is not illegal to hold your fingers out in front of someone's face. But with fighters such as John Jones and others, they're keeping their hands out while fighting. You know, we wanted to get your opinion. Do you think the MMA rules need to be changed to a degree?
Yeah, no, I think it should be changed. And I think you brought that up because everybody says, oh, Bas Rutten says he's a dirty fighter. No. I said, what I answered on a question, based on the eye poking, do you think that is dirty? And I thought, knowing John, how calm, cool, collected this guy is, and then holding the fingers literally like 2 seconds there in the eyes, he can see that he's doing that. You know, then I say, yeah, that's not cool because you know you're doing it. Maybe you think, oh, it's not hard enough or something, but I guarantee you at their gym, they're not allowed to do it. And especially not with Mike Winklejohn in the gym who lost an eye because somebody kicked him with a toenail in the eye. So he knows how bad it can be and what can happen if you lose an eye or not can look through it. So, and any sparring partner, I know that if I have a sparring partner doing that to me, I will give him one more chance, and then he's not my sparring partner anymore. I'm not going to help him out anymore. You know, so that was the only comment I made on that. Because people say, oh yeah, he's all free kicks. Well, they're legal. So I'm not going to say that's a dirty fighter. I say that's a very creative mind, and the way he comes up with the spinning elbows and all that stuff. He's an unbelievable fighter. I was just talking about those fingers in the eyes because if this would have been the only fight, then okay. But it has been a repetitive thing now, So I think he should get warned. And I think that if they had warnings in the past, I think even the referee could say before the fight starts, if you come close to his eyes, I'm going to give you a red card right away. That's going to put a lot of pressure on a fighter, and then hopefully it stops. That's the only way, I think, because there's nothing worse. I got stabbed in the eye one time in pro wrestling in Japan, believe it or not, for, what was it, New Japan, Antonio Inoki's organization. Man, I had a blind spot in the bottom of my eye for about 2 months. It was the wildest thing. And this guy goes, yeah, keep fighting. And I go, dude, I can't see anything. But okay, pro wrestling, I'll keep on fighting. I mean, but if it can happen in pro wrestling, well, it happens in the real fight as well.
Now, Bas, there's a new book out. It's a great book. It's called When We Were Bouncers. I recommend that everybody jumps on Amazon right now and gets a copy. And, you have a really interesting story in the book. I was just hoping you'd give us a quick rundown of the tale because it's such a great one.
Well, which one is it? The one that came out online, that one? Because I have a few crazy stories.
Let's do the online. Well, you know what? Pick the craziest one that you can tell us because I'm sure they're all great.
Oh, well, I want to keep some because in the books there are some. The craziest one was just one. One of the craziest ones was a fight, and we were bouncers, and some people come in, and you have to take those guys serious, and if they're really calm and they move away outside. Plus, then what happened also, I threw the guy outside, but the door was still closed, so I banged him first against the door really hard. And actually so hard that some thing broke off from the door. And I threw him outside, and he walks all the way up to our glass that we have, like special plexiglass, so they can't break it. And he was right in front of me, looking at me, and he did the thumb slice over the throat, like he was going to kill me. Now, these guys are serious guys. And then at that moment, when I know that they don't have a weapon on them, I'd rather go out there than I'm going to wait till they walk to the car or wait in the cart somewhere around the corner, and then I'm done with working, and suddenly they show up and something happens. So I took very serious. So I went outside right away because I wanted to take care of the problem right away then. And it happened to be that he was a southpaw. And he loaded his punch up. I guess he was really angry. So before he loaded it up, I already kicked him in the head. And he was down. And that was a scary moment. That's fun. Those moments where I always say that could have made my life a complete different life. Because he was sitting on his knees. He was really messed up. His lip was already hanging down. And then I wanted to kick him in the head because I was still thinking about the death threat he made. So I kicked him full in the head, but he fell backwards. He was like out. And so I kicked a hole in the air, so to say. And that's when I realized I was wearing steel toes, So I go, oof, yeah, if that would have been connecting, I would have killed the guy, Then I probably would have never been here. I wouldn't have been a fighter. I would have been in jail in Holland, So, yeah, those moments are lucky moments. Hopefully people hear a story like that, other bouncers, and maybe when they're wearing steel toe shoes, those are the things you have to watch out for, man. Because, when you get really angry or weapons get involved or death threats, you take it always to another level. And then scary things can happen.
It's crazy how 1 second can quite literally change your life. So for any bouncers listening, don't wear steel shoes, wear flip-flops or thongs or something like that. But
as a bouncer, no, but you just kick the leg. Why don't you kick the leg?
Yeah. I was going to say, Bas, we told everybody you were coming on the show. We opened up the floodgates for some fan questions. Everybody had some questions for you. So we'll go through a few of those. Now, Joey Jojo, he wanted to ask you, what would you say, in your opinion, was the most devastating liver shot you landed in your MMA career?
The most devastating liver shot?
Yeah.
There was Jason DeLucia.
Yeah.
I knocked him actually down 3 times with the liver shot. And the last one, I didn't feel any impact to the body. And that meant that he was just breathing in. So he wasn't flexing, and I felt my whole hand slide through his belly. And then when he went down, I go, yeah, okay, he's not going to get up with this one, because that's the magic spot. When you hit him when they're breathing him, and that was so hard that he was peeing blood.
Oof.
Afterwards. They had to take him out at the hospital. Yeah. So yeah, that was definitely the hardest. But I had a really good knee to the solar plexus and to the ribs against Suzuki. You can see that online when I knee him, and then the camera zooms out, and I think his feet land like 4 feet away from me. I knee him through the air.
Wow.
Yeah, that was a gnarly knee as well.
Let's not forget the amazing liver shot on Sports Science that destroyed that guy's organs. Now, Sean Knopf would like to ask. Well, it's a little bit of a statement as well. He says there's been so much talk lately that Pride was run by such evil people, that they were all on drugs, fights getting fixed, forcing guys to do things. And it seems like a lot of fighters have been Pride bashing lately. He just would like to know, from your perspective, how good or bad was it being a part of Pride?
I loved it. I loved every show. It was amazing. You know, once you have a small show, and that's 45,000 people are considered a normal show, that is something really special. You know, we're doing another show in front of 91,500 people. I mean, that was the craziest thing. It was outdoor, you know, and all these fighters, great fighters. I have such a great memories from waking up in the morning, just everybody's up early with the jet lag coming from America, so breakfast at the Hilton. Breakfast in the Hilton, you can ask any fighter who was ever in Japan fighting for Pride. That's the best. This is the best breakfast. Everybody would sit there, take their time. We would have whole stories that we would be sitting at the table for 2 hours, and all the fighters would come and join because it was always fun, the cracking jokes. And then, you know, I get another pineapple juice, a fresh pineapple juice, or a carrot juice, you know. It was amazing. And we had a really good time there. Everybody was met, you know, so many friendships that developed there in Japan. It was awesome. I really had a great time there.
Yeah, it's the little things, you know. We'll always remember the pineapple juice about Pride. Now, but Bas, Thunderlips wanted to ask you, how close were you to fighting Wanderlei Silva back in Pride, and what are your thoughts about the difficult situation he's been involved in at the moment?
Well, we were pretty close, I thought. What happened, that was that show, the 91,500 people. There was Dynamo or something, I forget the name right now. Anyway, they needed an opponent for him. Now, I was at the time, I didn't do any ground, but I was just training for the last 6 months Thai boxing, and it actually went really well. I was getting very strong. And I told him, I said, well, since this is an event where you have Pride fights and you have K1 fights, I would love to fight him, because they asked me if I wanted to do it. I said, I would love to fight him, but no Pride rules. Let's do K1 rules, but with the Pride gloves. That's what everybody wants to see anyway. They want to see us beating the crap out of each other, you know, in a striking war with Pride gloves. And they said, okay, well, let's ask. And then it never went through. And it wasn't because, you know, the conspiracy, oh, Wanderlei is scared. Wanderlei isn't scared of anybody, man.
Yeah.
This guy fights everybody. So that was really not it. They just went with a different opponent, and it didn't happen. And, what is happening lately to him, it's a shame. You know, this is going to be a tarnish on his career. I talked about it on Inside MMA last Friday with Dana White. I was live here at the offices, at the UFC offices. And, you know, and it's true. The Athletic Commission, once you walk out while you have to do a test, well, they're going to make an example out of you. You know, and otherwise, when you get caught, maybe you can't fight for 6 or 9 months, but that's pretty much the maximum penalty, you know. And this is going to be much worse than 9 months, I guarantee you that. They're going to go like, okay, let's make sure this will never happen again. And God knows they're going to give it a couple of years, you know. And with the age that he is right now, this could be a career killer, you know. And that's a shame, because he's such a good guy and such a fun guy to watch, always exciting. I mean, the fights he had in Pride was just the wildest all the time, you know. It's just the axe murderer is the perfect name for him. You know, he's just a killer. And then on the outside, he's the nicest person you ever meet. So that's a shame for him. I think he lost a lot of money with getting this fight. So on top of that, he's going to get suspended. And I hope for him it's not going to be too crazy.
I think, yeah. As fans, you definitely don't want to see Wanderlei away. I mean, he's already been away from fighting for so long. I want to also ask you, Bas. You mentioned that you were at the UFC offices, and we saw that photo you put up on Facebook. You were enjoying a delicious cold water. May I ask you, what were you doing at the UFC offices, and do you have any secret projects planned?
No. I was just there. We had shooting inside MMA because I'm shooting here at the movie. It's very hard for me to travel up and down the whole time, and especially if my call time is like 10 p.m., which was this time 10 p.m., and I had to work throughout the whole night. I couldn't go to LA and then fly back in time. I didn't want to take the risk because if I'm going to miss a flight, I got a whole set of people and actors waiting, and that's a lot of money that they're going to lose. So I said, okay, we do it from here. So I gave Dana a text. I said, man, I'm here. I'm shooting this movie. I would love to interview you because a lot has happened at the UFC right now, lately. Would you like to do it? He said, well, we'll be honored, man. I would love to do it. I said, man, can even do it at your offices? He said, yeah. And that was it. So we went to his office. They have their own studio there, of course. And we hooked our truck into that. We logged it in. And then I was live with Inside MMA. And we had Johnny Hendricks and Kenny Rice were doing the show. Johnny was replacing me there. But then I was coming back and forth from Las Vegas.
Now, Bas, we got one final fan question, then we'll get on to the tap-out round. Tom66 would like to know. He says, Forrest Griffin spoke about some of the health issues that he's had after doing TRT. Do you think that some of the fighters that were on TRT will be able to return to the form that we're at before doing TRT, or do you think they might have some issues like Chael did getting off TRT and returning back to form without it?
Yeah, you will have it. It depends if you really overdid it. There are some fighters that suddenly have a super low testosterone level, and they are going to have a problem. We had a doctor on our show and Inside of MMA, and he was telling me, he says, eventually it will come back. But there are, like what Chael is doing right now, those are ways to get it natural, your own natural production back. But these things are also on a list that he's taken, because if a normal person, because I asked the doctor that question, I said, what would happen if somebody has a normal testosterone level, so he's not sick, not nothing, and he takes those pills? He says, well, then he's going to get elevated testosterone level. So it's cheating. In his case, it was to bring his own production back because it's way too low. So it depends, man. It depends on how much they use, how they used it. I don't know. I hope everybody, of course, that it can come back. Normally, with a young guy, you'll never have that problem. 99.9%, the doctor said, it's always because of prior usage, and that's what he said. I'm just repeating his words.
All right, Bas. Now, before we let you go, we're going to do a quick tap-out round with you. As always, we fire off a bunch of questions, and you sort of answer them with the first thing comes to your mind. You ready?
Okay.
Alrighty. So, Bas, will we ever get to see you commentate a UFC event? I think fans ask us to mention this every single time, they find out you're on the show.
Oh, never say never. Listen, they have a great commentating team, but if he for fun says one time, hey, you want to jump in? I'll jump in. I would love to.
Now, Bas, you invite us over for dinner. What do you cook up as your signature meal?
Oh, it depends what you guys want to do. You want to go French cuisine, or do you guys want to go just barbecue? Because I got it both, So at home, like I make a butter. It's a Rutten butter. It's really good, and it's a garlic butter that beats all other garlic butters out there. When I go to parties like 4th of July or to a Thanksgiving party, I'm not allowed to bring bread and the garlic butter anymore because nobody eats the turkey anymore because everybody gets filled up with that stuff. But I start off with that. Later on, we can use the butter also on, whatever, ribs, meat, steaks, chicken. I got really good marinade that I use for that. And at the end, it's always good to have a nice, good ice cream. Get a good ice cream with a sabayon sauce, which is a warm sauce that you make with the liquor and with sugar and with the egg whites. And that goes over the ice cream, and that's really good.
Bas used to be a chef, and that's not a joke for anyone who didn't know. Bas, most awkward date that you've ever been on. Tell us about that.
I'm sorry, what more?
The most awkward date that you've ever been on, if you've ever had an awkward date.
Most awkward date. You know what? I was telling this story yesterday. This is really funny. I go with my wife, who's now my wife. We're 22 years together. This is when I fought in Japan for like a year or something, or less, I think 6-7 months. We go to Amsterdam. Now, believe it or not, I never had been to the red light district before, and she was never there either. So we said we're going to check it out because it's a real fun place. It's a safe place because that's why tourism go there. They make sure that there's a lot of cops, and it's fun to watch because you see these ladies behind the windows, and then you can knock on the door, and then you can go in there. They close the curtain, and you can do your business. That's how it works there. So I'm walking there with her, and this is the God honest truth. And these girls start knocking up, like girls, multiple, knocking on the windows, going, "Hey, boss, how you doing?" And that was pretty awkward. And my wife looked at me. I go, "I swear, I have never been here before." And what happened was that one of their, well, there's no great way to say this, pimps, fought with me on the second Banker show. And because he was a shoot fighter as well, from Amsterdam. And he fought. His name was Joop. He passed away. Too bad because he's a really good guy. But anyway, he fought there, brought back the magazines with him in it. But because he was in it, I was in these magazines as well, and he was talking about me. So these girls recognized me from the pictures in the magazines, and that's why they started knocking on the window. But it came out really bad.
Oh man, yeah. Were you sleeping on the couch that night? Be honest.
No, she believed me. She believed me because even if it would have been 40 before the time. And I told her, I said, "Listen, I always said this to my friends. I don't have anything to lie about. I wouldn't lie about that kind of stuff. You know, I mean, have you been here before? I did a bachelor party there one time, but I was coming in the evening with Peter Urts and all these guys." And I don't even remember that whole thing, we went here to the banana bar or something, I believe.
Now, Bas, we're borrowing this question from one of your fans, Hakim Mustole. He asks, if you could face anyone in MMA these days, who would you pick?
To fight?
Yeah, if you were still fighting, if you pick one person from MMA these days, who would you want to fight?
Oh, man. Well, first of all, I would fight at 205, so I would have a big problem with picking John Jones. Because he's a great wrestler, and he really knows how to use his distance. And striking-wise, you got to fight this guy inside. But once you're inside, he is really good with wrestling. And let's face it, my wrestling always sucked. Because I was on the ground, I could defend myself. But nowadays, once you get down and then with his length and, so, yeah, that would have been a problem. Still, if I would fight, people always say, well, who would win? I say, I would win. I would always say I would win. I think it's the dumbest thing for a fighter to say, I don't know if I could really win that fight. I think you have to be 100% with your mind going into the fight that you're going to win the fight. There cannot be any doubt, and just because of that, that's why I say, I'm probably going to win the fight, and that would be a tough one.
Yeah, of course. Now, Bas Modulus, another one of the fans. Now, here's a fight where you wouldn't necessarily have to make 205. Modulus wants to know: would you consider coming out of retirement if a fight with Steven Seagal was offered?
It's my knees. That is a big one because right now I cannot train anymore, but I don't know if I need a lot of training for that. So I would, as long as I get in really good shape, I think my muscle memory in my head and, my mind will always be there. The technique still. So, but the fact is, it's very hard for me to train. Everything hurts a lot. I don't have a lot of power in my right arm. I'm recouping now. Actually, it started developing the biceps again, and I'm just praying that it keeps on going. But this arm has been out of order for like 4 years, so it's very hard for the nerves to start kicking back.
Yeah.
Absolutely, Bas, and hopefully it does keep improving. Now, me and Casper get attacked in a dark alley. What should our first defense and attack be for the attackers?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of questions again. Without weapons, kick to the pills. I mean, it's really like that, and maybe throw a punch first, preferably a hook, because a lot of people, they don't move back on a hook as much as on a straight punch, so they will stay more in range. So a nice left hook and then a full kick in between the legs. That should go out to the first one for sure. If you have multiple guys, yeah, the first one needs to go down really, really freaking hard.
Okay.
And that will do it.
And last of all, Bas, who's winning UFC 175? Can we get a Bas prediction? Chris Weidman or Lyoto Machida?
We were talking about it last week. That's going to be such a hard fight to call. It's can Weidman take it to the ground? He might the first round, but can he keep doing it? But then again, Weidman keeps impressing me the whole time. Striking wise, I think Machida is more seasoned. He has better distance and he's really freaking fast, you know. So when he fought Gegard Mousasi, I thought Mousasi was going to beat him in his striking. Now Mousasi didn't look anything like he normally looked. I have to say that. But I know Musashi's striking is really good. But I think the speed from Machida really threw him off his game. And suddenly a head kick, you know, and he nearly saw it. And, you know, that does a lot to people. They go like, whoa, this is a different speed. And that's what Machida has. He has pinpoint accuracy. He's got great timing. He's just a very hard guy to finish. And most of the time, though, if it goes to a decision, it could be Weidman because he will be attacking probably more. And Machida, to counter fighters many times, when they don't attack too many times, then, well, they do everything of the counter, and then that means they score less points. But I've been saying that for a while from Machida, but he really started attacking later in his career, and especially this weight class for him right now. I think it's a really good weight class for him. He's looking phenomenal, looking strong. He's in shape. He's been there in 5-round fights already. So that's a toss-up. I have no clue. It's all about what can he take it to the ground, or can he surprise us again with one of these crazy punches? Then again, Machida's much too careful for that. He's very good at distance, and that's his power. You know, so great base. So it's a hard one. I don't know.
Now, guys, that is Bas Rutten. You can check him out on Twitter at Bas Rutten MMA. It's always a pleasure having him on. He commentates World Series of Fighting, World Series 11, happening early July 4th, I believe. And also, you can't miss out on his great show, Inside MMA. You can catch that online here in Australia. Bas, it's a pleasure having you on. We can't wait till this movie comes out so we could see some more classic Bas on the silver screen.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. It's not as big part as I had in Here Comes the Boom, but it's a fun part. I'm a bad guy this time. And Paul Blart, he's a badass mall cop. It's gonna be. It's really funny. We have been laughing really hard, so it's going to be a real fun movie to watch for everybody.
Awesome, and can't wait to watch it. Again, Bas, thank you so much for coming on the show, and can't wait to do it again soon.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Always fun chatting to Bas Rutten. As promised, we have delivered, and Bas obviously delivered. Always an entertaining guy, always insightful, and always great to get his opinions on anything MMA today.
That's right. You know, the man that, you know, we have dreams of going to the red light district with, and, you know, definitely somebody who has more than one or two great stories up his sleeve, and looking forward to having him back already. This is the kind of guy, you know, just an amazing guy. Our next interview, though, Cass, is a man of controversy. You know, people have wanted to see him back in the UFC for years now, and every time it seems like his name pops up in the news, and, you know, it always seems like Dana might let him back in, but we've never gotten very close. And there's a lot of stuff to talk about with this man. I'm of course talking about Paul Daley. We've got Paul on the show. He's coming up next, and I think we've got him on the line. So let's kick this interview off.
All right, guys, our next guest is a former UFC fighter, a former Strikeforce fighter, a former Bellator fighter. He's fought in Bama. He is a mixed martial artist, a kickboxer. He's not Paul Monthly. He's not Paul Weekly. He's none other than Paul Daley. Paul, welcome to Submission Radio.
Hello, how are you, mate?
Yeah, excellent. It's great to have you on the show. Now, Paul, just getting right to it, we haven't seen you fighting in the United States since your victory over Rudy Bears, Bellator 72. I'm sure all the American fans miss you. What's the latest with you getting an American visa, and how close are we to seeing you fighting back in the States?
Well, I think we're pretty close. I'm in contact more or less every day now with two advisors I have over in the US, Mike Kogan, who's King Mo's manager, Dan Robinson, who's the head guy over there. The Black Zillions are working hard on my behalf, speaking to the right people and trying to get me back over to the States.
Exactly. Well, that's great to hear, Paul. Now, assuming that your visa application gets granted, and you can fight in the United States again, would you ever consider fighting for Bellator again? Obviously, they have a new president. Bjorn Rebney is gone, and Scott Coker is in. What are your thoughts on that, and would you want to fight with Bellator again?
Well, Scott Coker is a great guy. You know, I was over there at Strikeforce with him. He put me in big fights, you know. He put me on the main stage. I was on all the big cards and fighting, you know, on the big stadium shows. So it wouldn't be a bad move to accept an offer from Bellator if it should come. But we've heard nothing yet. Although I'm sure something might pop up, depending on what happens with the visa.
And I think we're all pretty positive that it's just a matter of time till you're fighting, back in the States again. I think it's going to happen. One thing I wanted to ask you, Paul, now when you fought in Strikeforce last, you had some great fights, but you asked to be released due to lack of frequent fights. Scott Coker was, of course, running Strikeforce at the time. Now that he's running Bellator, would you be at all worried that you'd be facing the same problem with getting enough fights?
No, because the major problem there was that Zuffa was buying out Strikeforce, which is why the fights were slowing down, because obviously there was a lot happening behind the scenes. But, Scott Coker, like I say, Scott Coker did keep me busy enough when I was there. And there were really big fights I was involved in before everything slowed down, just before the Zuffa purchase.
Absolutely, Paul. And obviously you were with Bellator before. What was it like dealing with Bjorn Rebney? And do you think Scott Coker going to the company, do you think that's a move in the right direction for the company?
Oh, yeah. I spoke to Bjorn once, and he was pretty cool. I met him face-to-face over the first fight there in Florida. He was a cool guy, but you never really know with these executive types. For them, obviously they have to be nice to the people that are helping sell their product. So I never really got a genuine feel for him, but most of the guys that you meet at the top are going to be nice to you if you're helping them out. Scott Coker, the same. He probably I feel like is a little bit more genuine, having come from a martial arts background and done everything for the sport, either boosting up K1 kickboxing or starring in films as a stuntman extra or whatever. He's a martial artist to the core. So Scott Coker's a cool guy as well.
And Paul, obviously, Bellator was more of a thing that was on weekly. Scott wants to turn it into sort of a spectacle, very similarly to Strikeforce and the UFC. Do you think that's the right move for Bellator? Do you think they were having too many shows with too many fighters and so kind of spreading themselves out a bit thin?
Yes, no. I like the Bellator format of the tournament. That the guy, the CEO doesn't really pick the fights, and the tournament decides who's going to be fighting the champion for the belt. I like that concept, but I do feel that it does need major fights to carry it. Like the major non-tournament fights that they would have heading up the shows were not really that interesting. So maybe keep the tournament format, a little bit, but head it up with some more interesting main events, and reduce the frequency so it's not every week. Like, do have it as a spectacle, but keep the tournament. I would say.
Now, Paul, you've had a fairly busy year. You've had a lot of success recently in kickboxing, but obviously, you're also a mixed martial artist. What do you favor at the moment, kickboxing or MMA?
Well, I've been training mostly kickboxing, so I'm enjoying that, but I've been doing it a lot, so my mind is slowly drifting back towards MMA, especially with Bama coming up. Kickboxing is interesting. I love the training. MMA has a little bit more to it, so it keeps me a little bit more interested. But I've got a few more kickboxing fights left this year, but the training can become a little bit, boring, because it's just doing the same shit all the time, running, hitting pads, sparring, doing your skipping, your conditioning, whereas MMA, you have your wrestling, your jiu-jitsu, a little bit more game planning, even though there is some game planning in kickboxing. So I'm looking forward to return to MMA. I'm enjoying kickboxing, but I'm looking forward to getting back to MMA.
Now, Paul, if things with the UFC don't work out in the future, would you be interested in going back to Glory? Obviously, I believe you were supposed to fight at Glory 5, and something didn't work out there. But now the Glory is really growing all over the world. Would you be interested in fighting for them and, showing off your kickboxing skills to a wider range of audience now?
Yeah, I would. Especially if I do get an offer from Bellator and I get my visa, the Glory thing could work out quite nice. But again, I fight frequently because I enjoy fighting. I feel it keeps sharp. Obviously keeps the money coming in, keeps your name out there. But I wouldn't want my fans to be bored of seeing me. I've had a little break now since my last kickboxing fight. I'm coming back again in August, and I think you need that break for people to miss you a little bit. And doing the crossover with MMA and kickboxing frequently. It could just be like with Bellator, people start getting sick of seeing you. Same with the UFC now. They have so many shows, not necessarily getting sick of seeing you, but it becomes less interesting and less of something to look forward to. So I don't think I'll continue doing the crossover so much. I'll either pick a sport and stay in it.
It's a good point. And obviously, as they say, time apart makes the heart grow fonder. I wanted to get your opinion also. Let's talk scoring, judging. There's so many controversial decisions in MMA and obviously kickboxing. What do you think about the way MMA is scored in terms of grappling? And do you think the judges favor takedowns too much, especially when there's no damage inflicted afterwards?
Yeah, definitely. I think takedowns are highly overrated if you don't do anything with them. I mean, it's hard to say. It is a hard position for the judge to be in, but I feel if you're not working to finish, whether you're standing or on the feet, then you're losing the fight. In my opinion, obviously, if you're working to finish, but you're getting pummeled, getting jabbed or whatever, then you work to finish, but you're getting fucked up, so you're going to lose the fight. I don't mean working to finish recklessly. I mean, effective. Anything you have to do must be effective. That's what I say. And it's a martial art. It was made for battle. It was made for self-defense. If you're taking someone down in a street fight, or if you're on a battlefield, like the old Spartans, and you've just busted this guy over, you're not just going to chill on him because all his other boys are going to come and get you, or he might pull something out of his fucking sandal and stab you or whatever. So you've got to be working. You've got to be working to finish. You know what I mean? That's what I say. You got to think you're a martial artist. If you're anything you're doing is to finish a guy, finish your opponent.
Absolutely, Paul. Now, it's no secret that the big goal at the moment for all the fans and you is to end up back in the UFC. What exactly are the lines of communication at the moment between yourself and the UFC? Have you had a chance to speak with Dana or Joe Silva personally, or go through management at all to have a chat with them?
No, I've not spoken to any of them directly. I've spoke to them, not really spoke to them. I've had some communications with them through other people that help me. I'm not managed. I have no management right now. I'm representing myself, but I have people advising me and speaking on my behalf. And they've had contact with the UFC guys like Joe Silva and Dana White. But it's all pretty much dependent on my visa, and Dana's pretty. He's set in his ways. I don't think he wants me to come back, although, Lorenzo says it's up to him. I just don't think Dana wants me there. I think he made such a big deal of it that maybe it's just a little bit too much for him to go back on. So, but we'll see. We'll see what happens.
I was going to say, I see what you're saying, because, Dana White, he's never in the middle on anything. It's either black or it's white, it's either left or it's right. But I think, in life, time heals all. Josh Barnett, he wasn't in the UFC for a while. He's back. There was a point after the Holyfield fight back in the day when Mike Tyson was a huge villain, and yet now it's impossible to, portray him as a bad guy. And obviously Dana White was very upset at the time, but he seems a little bit more open to the idea of having you back than he did years ago. What do you think has to happen? I was going to say, what is your opinion? What do you think has to happen, for you to be back in the UFC and make him understand, that he can have full confidence in you? Obviously, you'll be a changed man.
I think like I said, the visa's a start. Getting a visa, being allowed to fight on the big cards in America, obviously, it helps. Dana helps the business. I think it's just a personal decision for him. I don't think there's anything that I could do that I'm not already doing. My fans are still with me. I'm still, my name's still out there. I haven't faded anywhere. I'm still winning. I'm still knocking people out. I've done the crossover. I'm doing well at that. So I don't think in any other situation, had what I did not been such a big thing, I think I would have been back in the UFC by now. If it had been, I don't know, some of the other crazy stuff people have done, in the octagon, I think I would have been back in by now, but just so happens mine was really blown up, even though people have done worse and still continue to do stuff since, but it is what it is, and I just have to just keep going, you know.
Mm-mm.
Now, Paul, obviously, I just wanted to get your thoughts on the whole Jason High situation. You know, he pushed a ref. He apologized. The ref accepted the apology. However, he got fired from the UFC and suspended for a year by the commission. Well, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think the punishments may be a little bit too severe in certain cases in MMA?
Yeah, yeah, I do. I think obviously Jason Hyde. I didn't really see the incident, but he pushed the ref. Striking, he pushed the ref. With fighters, you're in a combat zone, and obviously the referee is there to moderate and keep things in check. Even the referee, by him accepting the apology, understands that you're running on adrenaline. Sometimes, everything's at stake in the fight. Your next mortgage payment, your child's school fees is all riding on this win. So there's a lot of emotion in the fight. There's a lot at stake. So, of course, things, your emotions may run out of check. You may lose it every now and again. I think that we have to be more, people in the sport and in the MMA community have to be more understanding about that. Every other sport, things happen and things get overlooked in football, in rugby, in ice hockey. You just get sin binned when the emotions get, in boxing even. But in MMA, it's looked on so badly that I just think it's a little bit ridiculous, and that is my opinion on Jason Hyde's suspension. I think it is a little bit ridiculous for him to be punished so badly. I think a fine is good enough. And he keeps his UFC job, and that's that.
Yeah, I think it's pretty crazy. We had Big John McCarthy on last week, and he pretty much said the same thing. It was a knee-jerk reaction, and a little bit harsh on Jason, to basically ban him. But let's talk future opponents, Paul. If you get back in the UFC, who's someone that you would like to fight?
There's a few great fights out there for me. I don't really have any people that I'd like to go after, but I think there's fights that make sense for me. Tyron Woodley, I'd love to fight him. He's getting a lot of hype. He got himself into a number one contender position and lost. I had a 3-round fight with him. I think I'm more skilled now. I think I would beat him easily, and I even think the fight back then over at Strikeforce was closer than, people don't really acknowledge it when they kind of bury that fight because he's doing so well now, but I think it was a lot closer than people remember, or people, whatever. But there's also, I think I match up well with Johnny Hendricks, even though he's got the great wrestling, likes to stand. He is athletic, but I don't think he's very fast. And he's not a great mover on his feet. Matt Brown is another great fight. He's getting a lot of hype. He's sort of Spartan warrior type guy who walks through everything, keeps coming back and pulling off spectacular wins, but I don't think he can walk through what I've got for him, and I think that makes a good fight as well. So there are some interesting fights. Robbie Lawler, Hector Lombard, two of the most dangerous guys, I think, out of all those guys I've named so far, that would be good fights that I wouldn't be calling for, but if I was paid enough money, I'd fight, because those guys are really, really dangerous people.
Absolutely, Paul. And, it must kind of annoy you because the welterweight division in the UFC, it's just exploded with the GSP leaving. There's so many great fights in there. So it would be great to see you in there and take on some of these guys. Now, we told the Paul Daley fans out there that you're coming onto the show. And believe me, Paul, there's a lot of them here in Australia and all over the world. So we got some fan questions for you. We're going to shoot a couple across to you right now if you're ready, okay?
Cool.
All right, first question is, and this is asked by Maureen Kratos from the forums. He goes, your left hook is one of the top weapons in the sport. Were you always able to throw them with that much power, or have you had to work to develop that punch?
I've just always been able to punch. I think it's just a natural thing. I was fighting. I was in fights from a very young age, and it always seemed to do the job. It's just something I've had naturally. As I've evolved in the sport, I've been a little bit more patient with it and able to set it up and know what works to bring people into a position where I can throw the shot. But I've always been able to hit hard and knock people out. As I was a young kid, I was like 14, 15.
as they say, it's just something people are either born with or not. Now, Buff wanted to ask, WTF happened. So, what exactly happened to Roughhouse, and how close are you and Dan Hardy these days?
Well, Roughhouse sort of just like dissolved as such. Dan moved away, Ross moved away, even though he was still representing the team. The gym we used to train at, our regular meetings twice a week, they did the Team Roughhouse meeting, that moved places, so we had to move to another gym which was further away for the Nottingham-based guys and closer to the guys based in Leicester, which is where the guys like Jimmy Warhead and Andre Winner are from. So what happened is I just decided to open my own place, and it was initially just a training camp for myself, the Spirit Dojo, and when me and my coaches could train in, I'd just bring in sparring partners as required, and in time it's grown into a school now. I have probably about 80 to 100 students. We train Monday to Friday, and I do my sparring there. I spar with my students. I'm growing them and breeding these warriors, and I'm testing myself against them. They're all young, they're all hungry, they're all it's a bit weird because some of them used to be some of my fans, so these guys are a little bit tense to be in there with me, which results in great sparring because they want to impress. So I'm Spirit Dojo now. Me and Dan Hardy don't really talk. He's got a busy schedule, we haven't spoken for years, to be honest, but there's no bad blood or anything. We're just on two different schedules. He's a very busy guy with what he's doing now, and that's that.
Fantastic, Paul. Now, I think this is a question that everybody wants to know, and it's asked by Itsy Bitsy Silver. So expand on this as much as you can for us. What was Josh Koscheck saying before the thing happened in the UFC? Could you tell us what he was saying to you?
He didn't say anything. Like, been over this a million times. And if he did say something, it's not something I can remember. I know there was some kind of banter, but it wasn't so significant that I could remember it, to be honest with you.
Fair enough. Now, Buff has another question. Big fan of you in Cage Rage, and he wanted you to... are there any Cage Rage stories that you could tell us about back in the day, just because the show was wild, and only hard cases went to watch them fights back then? That's from Buff.
Yeah, Cage Rage shows were crazy. A lot of city people there, a lot of Londoners. They were just pretty raw, even though the talent was very high. The shows, the audience was pretty raw. Not everyone was really looking at MMA as a sport, so you've got all your local tough guys coming to the show, your football fans and your football hooligans and stuff like that. So yeah, it was all very interesting, and people knew that the sport had the potential to do something great, especially in the UK. So there was a lot of money people around the show, and a lot of investment being made. And even though the show was young, it was quite a flash show, and we had local celebrities coming to the show, and it was really good. Probably some of my best times in MMA was with Cage Rage. Some of my favorite fights, and it was crazy. 10,000 people at Wembley Arena. That just says it all.
Wow, I wish we had an opportunity to check that out. Now, Cajun wants to know, how's the weight cut issue going? Is it still an issue? How's the diet going? And are you planning on staying in the same weight in the future, or do you see yourself competing in middleweight at one point in your career?
Well, my last MMA fight was at 77 in Bamo. That was an easy weight cut. All previous ones, for my last 5 MMA fights, I think 5 or 6 have been really good. I've got a good routine down to cutting the weight, so it's not really an issue anymore. Our fights in kickboxing are 80 kilos, so I've got to have my weight down to make the weight for these kickboxing fights. They're quite intense, and big weight cuts aren't really recommended for kickboxing. I'm going to be taking more shots to the head, so I'll be putting myself in a little bit more danger. So keep my weight down nice and light for these kickboxing fights is really helping me make the cut to 77 rather than cutting from like 85 to 77. I'm already at like 80 kilos for these kickboxing fights, cutting down to 77, so it's a lot easier.
Great. Now, Paul, we're going to do what we do with all our guests, which is the Submission Radio Tap-Out round. It's a little bit of fun. We throw a bunch of questions at you, and you answer them as quickly as possible, kind of like word association. It's all a bit of fun. You ready?
Yo,
Okay, so lock, stock, or snatch, which is better?
snatch.
Oh, okay. All right. Now, Paul, what happened to England in the FIFA World Cup?
They just messed up. There was no team. There was no team.
Now, if you could have a rematch, who would you pick and why?
Tyron Woodley, because he's being overrated.
Well, okay. Now, Paul, we want you to finish the sentence. People don't know that I...
Used to be an actor, a child acting star.
Really?
Oh, wow.
Well, we have to expand on that one. What did you act in?
It's a film called, you can watch it, it's a film called Sammy and Rosie Get Laid. And it's not a porn film, although as a film it sounds. But you can look at it, it's on YouTube. Take a look at me in the end credits as well. You'll see my name up there.
Awesome.
Yeah, Sammy and Rosie Get Laid.
Sammy and Rosie Get Laid. And we're glad we don't
watch...
need a credit card to watch this film.
Yeah, we only watch porn here at Submission
film
Radio.
for free. The film was so bad that it's out there for free. So you can take a look at it.
We only watch porn here at Submission Radio, but we'll make an exception for that one.
Nice one.
Well, speaking of your work, Paul, what are your favorite fights of yours to watch?
To watch, I like the one, the Silva, the Bama knockout that I just had recently. I'm not sure what number Bama it was. I like the Mark Weir fight. Is a pretty cool one to watch, and the Scott Smith one. They're my top three that I like to watch. Although the Masaki fight I had at Strikeforce was quite interesting, because he's a really tough guy, and I was a bit worried about him, but I think I fought pretty well. And then everybody loves the Nick Diaz fight except me, because it was so wild and unscripted and no technique and just no game plan. It's horrible to watch for me. It's entertaining for fans, but the plan that we had in our head just didn't show itself at all. And it was just like this crazy street fight and just wild swinging punches. But the fans loved it. I didn't. But my top three ones that I like to analyze for performance purposes is probably Mark Weir, Scott Smith, and De Silva, because that's when things that we worked on really came out, and it was really good performances.
Well, Paul, speaking of that Nick Diaz fight, would you want to have a rematch with the man?
Yeah, I'd love to have a rematch with Nick Diaz, because it would be a pay-per-view, and I think the pay-per-view numbers would be great, which means that I'd get more money. And I think, like I say, the thing that we plan to do, I'll be able to do them now, because I've got slightly more composure than the initial fight, where I was just crazy, because I thought I could put him away. But I think we've got a much better tactic if we was to have a rematch. And I think I would be in. I think it'd be much more of a better performance from me. And still an entertaining fight, so it'll be cool.
Yeah. The first one is absolutely nuts. Now, I wanted to ask you, what's it like fighting in Russia? And also, did you wrestle any bears?
I didn't wrestle any bears. They had us on lockdown. We didn't even leave the hotel.
Wow.
I don't know if that's just safety or whatever, but it was nice to be in Moscow. The Legends people, the promotion there, treat us very, very well. It was cool to hang out with John Jones and hear him say good things about me, Frank Mir. They were also there. It was weird because John Jones was, cheering for me at the weigh-ins, and even though he's 6 years younger than me, I'm still a big fan of his. And he was at my weigh-ins cheering for me, so it was a bit surreal. It was a good experience. Didn't wrestle no bears, but Russia's cool. I wouldn't want to fight there again because they have rings there. Legends do their MMA in a ring, and I'm not really a fan of the ring now. But put me in a cage, put me back in Russia, and we could do that again.
Absolutely. Well, Frank Mir didn't cheer for you. What's wrong with Frank Mir? I don't get this guy.
Frank Mir was he was supposed to be getting ready for Overeem. I think that was the fight that was coming up, but I think he was on his downtime.
I see that explains the Overeem fight. Now, will GSP return to the UFC? What are your thoughts?
Probably. I mean, he was like Joe Rogan said, he's getting $5 million a fight. He's going to be in no rush to get back to the UFC. He's got a hell of a lot of money. He's achieved a lot, but obviously he has his legacy. But I think he could return. I would like for him to return and be involved in some more exciting fights, like get him in there and like have him really put on the show, like the Matt Hughes knockout, which is one of my favorite fights of his. Like when he used to beat GSP when he first got in the UFC, without the risk of losing all the money in the belt, just the young guy, even though he's not going to be young, but fighting with that flair, more of a flair instead of such a tactician.
Yeah, I think that's what happens when you're young. You know, the older you get, I think the more scared you get. At least with us, that is.
We're scared all the time.
I wanted to ask you, Paul, after you're done with fighting, what will your career path be?
I would like to get out of the gym. I would more than likely have a gym, but even though I don't want to do it too much, I'd like to step away from the sport completely, so you don't get the urge to return. So I'd probably say property. If I have enough money saved up and no debts, then I'd like to. I like property. I watch a lot of property programs. We've got like Property Ladder over here in the UK, Homes Under the Hammer, Double Your House for Half the Money, and all this type of stuff that I watch with Sarah Beanie. So I'm a big property buff. So I'd like to do something like that.
Wow, that's interesting, man. Now, your last fight in Australia was in 2010. When can we expect you to fight here again and kick some ass in front of all your Aussie fans?
I'd love to come back. I would come back. The first offer I got, if it was decent, but the last offer I got, which was from Impact Fight Night, there was a big, I don't know if it made like the press and that, but they didn't pay hardly anybody. I think Josh Barnett got paid, Dennis Kang got like half the money. Ken Shamrock obviously got paid, and then I think the rest of the guys didn't get anything. So get me a decent promoter who's going to pay the money, and I'll come back to Australia 100% because it was a great experience. Since then, I have been offered fights. I've been offered a fight with John Wayne Park, but that didn't pan out. But that would have been interesting. I'd like to fight him. But yeah, for kickboxing or MMA, I know as big as MMA is in Australia, I think the Thai boxing community, more so than the kickboxing community, even though you guys do like the kickboxing, I think they like my fighting style more so in the kickboxing than they would in the MMA. So promoters, get in contact with me. I'll fight kickboxing. I'll fight anybody, MMA, whatever. Just get in contact before the US people snatch me up, because I hear some things are going to be happening.
Well, there you go. He's a hot commodity. So, you know, obviously Aussies definitely love your fighting style. In Australia, we love a good scrap. We love a good fight. So we'd be happy to have you here anytime, Paul. Guys, you can catch Paul at spiritdojo.co.uk or his Facebook, Semtex MMA. Paul, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for being on Submission Radio.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
Wow, what an interview with Paul Daley. You know, I'm really excited to see what happens in the future with his career, and hopefully he ends up in the UFC. There's a lot of fun fights there. But guys, we have to talk about, you know, the fights that happened over at our neighbors' country, New Zealand. You know, UFC New Zealand. There's a lot of stuff to talk about, Cass, so let's jump right into it.
Yeah, we're going to break down the whole card, starting off right there with the prelims. Pretty interesting night. First fight on the card was obviously John Vellante versus Sean O'Connell. A few fun facts about this one. Jeremy Horn, of course, coming out with O'Connell. And I'll tell you what, Jeremy Horn's looking pretty big these days. He looks like if he was fighting, he'd be about heavyweight. Now, just in regards to this fight, you know, John Vellante, he's a guy with, you know, he's got a lot of talent. He trains with Chris Weidman, but I don't see him putting it all together. You know, a lot of sloppy weaving hooks. Vellante was often, you know, he gets hit a lot. He was circling to the wrong side. He circled towards O'Connell's power hand. You know, I think as far as this fight goes, Vellante lacks a little bit of that maturity and experience, and he needs to pace himself. He's throwing huge bombs, trying to knock, you know, Sean O'Connell out. We saw that in the Maldonado fight, and he basically tends to gas around the second or third round. And, you know, in this case, Vellante did get the nod from the judges, but I honestly thought Sean O'Connell won. He controlled the octagon, he controlled Vellante, and, you know, there was a lot of times where we really saw Vellante heaving in this one. So it'd be very interesting to see, you know, what happens in the future for John Vellante. But, you know, he's not exactly, he's a fun fighter in the sense that, you know, he fights like it's UFC 73 and he's Chris Lieben. even, minus the knockout power. But I mean, he's lost the last 2, so if he wants to stay in the company, he needs to work on a lot of things, such as his cardio and his boxing defense.
Awesome, Cass. Awesome. Some great insight there. What was the following fight after that?
So then we obviously had Daniel Hooker from New Zealand versus Entwistle. Now, Entwistle obviously from the UK. Now, this is an interesting fight. Obviously, Entwistle, former soccer player, took down Daniel Hooker straight away, and he was going for a submission. I mean, he's had some really, really quick submissions in the past, has Entwistle. And, he went for a really dangerous heel hook, the inside heel hook, and he basically clung onto it. He didn't go for anything else. And there was a few times where he almost had that heel hook. It looked really close to, to being finished. Daniel Hooker stayed really, really calm, and he made Entwistle pay. Entwistle really committed to that heel hook, and Daniel Hooker started going off with those elbows, a few at first, and then he really started teeing off on him, ended up getting on top, and got the bloody TKO, and the first win for New Zealand. And Daniel Hooker, great guy, really happy for him to have a win in his home country, but he's not exactly Roddy Piper on the mic, and, seemed like he was doing his best Mark Hunt impersonation with his one-word answers. Up next, we had Neil Magny from America versus De Lima from Brazil. Probably one of the biggest notable things from this fight. Obviously, Neil Magny had some early striking success until it went down to the ground where De Lima pretty much stayed on top for most part. Neil Magny did find himself in a little bit of trouble right at the end of round 2 where De Lima was going for a triangle. Well, actually, I think it started off as an armbar. Magny picked him up, put him up against the cage, and slammed him, but it only tightened the triangle for De Lima. And had the round been any longer, Magny would have been in some serious trouble. Second round, Magny came out, completely different fight, really started using his range, started teeing off on De Lima with some beautiful straights, very aggressive, and got the TKO. Up next was obviously Vic Gruich and Chris Indich. Now, obviously those guys were 2 Aussies from The Ultimate Fighter, the most recent one with Canada. Basically back and forth brawl until Vic backed Chris up against the cage, landed a flurry, and put him away with a 1-2 for the TKO. So, it was a win-win fight, but a lose-lose fight. Obviously one of the Aussies was going to be staying with the UFC, but obviously one of them wasn't. In this case, it was Chris Indich, and Vic Gruich finds himself still with the company. Then we had Richie Vasilik from Australia against Roldan Sanga-An from Philippines. Not the greatest performance in the world by Richie, to be perfectly honest. I mean, he's a strong guy. He did dominate Roldan towards the later 2 rounds. There was quite a bit of back and forth, especially at the start on the ground. I guess notable things from this fight: Richie really needs a belt, if not the title, then at least a belt to keep his pants on. And I'm really surprised with Richie. He had a not the greatest rear naked choke attempt, and I think he needs to work on his rear naked choke to really put guys away. I think he really could have put Roldan away a little bit earlier in that fight. Now, on to the next fight. Jake Matthews, of course, from Australia versus Dashawn Johnson from the US. Really, really, really impressive fight here from Jake Matthews. I mean, really put on a performance. There's obviously comparisons during the fight to a young Rory McDonald. I don't know if he's on Rory's level yet. I mean, Rory, he's really up there. But Jake Matthews, beautiful start. He's undefeated. I believe he moved to 9-0 in his career. I think I could be wrong. Dashawn basically had some ill-placed 12-6 elbows to the back of the head. I think in the first round, the referee took a point away. Pretty much from there, it was downhill. Not anything to do with the points, just because Jake Matthews really put on a clinic. When he was on the ground, he would switch from submission to strikes, back to submissions, back to strikes. Beautiful ground and pound. I don't know if it was Donkey Kong ground and pound like Mike Goldberg was saying, but it was very nice ground and pound. He switched nicely between his strikes and submissions, and he locked up an excellent triangle once Dashawn got on top. And it seems like he was having a bit of trouble with his with a forearm. I don't know what exactly he was signaling, but all in all, pretty entertaining prelims.
Yeah, that's some interesting points there. It's great to see that some of the locals got a big win there. And Jake Matthews, we had a chat about this kid earlier back on a few episodes, and we were talking about how we thought it was ludicrous that he wasn't signed straight away. So much talent, so much potential, and I mean, this kid's only about 20 years old, I believe.
Yeah, he's really young, and I mean, this is MMA. It's a young man's game, And we really are seeing the old generations being phased out. Even Josh the Punk Thompson was saying how, he is in that generation where they are phasing out, and it's all the young kids coming up here who do train MMA and do train all the aspects of the game. And, obviously Jake Matthews, fantastic Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. On to the main card. So the main card, the curtain jerkers, kicked it off, and it was our boy Robert Whittaker, and you can see an interview with him on the channel for Submission Radio. Now, obviously the Aussie Robert Whittaker was fighting in his homeland against Mike Rhodes from America. This is a clinic. This is a really beautiful fight by Robert Whittaker. I mean, he was bobbing, he was weaving, a lot of feints. He was putting together really nice combos, stepping to the left and putting a lot more torque into his kicks. And we saw a lot more kicks from Robert Whittaker this time. He did say when he interviewed him that he was putting everything together and he was going to be a much more complete fighter. And that's pretty much what we saw. He wasn't just boxing. He was using a lot more of his game. Even in, I think it was the third round, he landed a huge takedown. He was really getting in close to Mike Rose, landing a lot of elbows, cutting him, those razor elbows. And Mike Rose looked really uncomfortable to have Robert Whittaker that close. And right when it seemed like he was gonna keep landing elbows, Robert went in there and scored a massive takedown and landed a lot more elbows in there. So a really, really great fight from Robert Whittaker. He got the interview with Kenny Florin afterwards, and for the record, Kenny, our interview was a lot better.
That's hilarious. Now, another guy that was highly touted when he came in the UFC at a younger age, Charles Oliveira versus Hatsuhiko from Japan. Cass, how did that one go down?
Yeah, this is an awesome fight. I mean, both guys really, really good, really, really slick with their submissions. Charles Oliveira, obviously, we'll remember, I think his second or third fight in there, getting submitted rather surprisingly to himself by Jim Miller. Since then, he has been on an absolute tear. Obviously lost to Frankie Edgar not too long ago, but this is great. Hatsuhiko, absolute legend, fantastic with the submissions. These guys are both high-level black belts. We saw Hayoki with a flying triangle attempt in the first round, which is really awesome to see. Great grappling exchanges. It was pretty much a fight that took place almost exclusively on the ground. I'd love to see the stats afterwards to see how many actual strikes were landed. But basically, it was scramble after sweep, after transition. It was awesome. And in the end, Oliveira submitted Hatsuhiko, basically flipped him over with sort of like a guillotine, sort of like a Peruvian necktie. Let's call it a Peruvian guillotine. And he was the first to submit Hatsuhiko in his long career. So big ups to Charles Oliveira.
I think we're coining phrases for submissions here at Submission Radio, and what better place as this is Submission Radio. Now, Cass, the next one, so Pelele, we saw him in the octagon not too long ago, and he was fighting again on this card.
Yeah, he's having a lot of fights now. I will say this: Saul Pelele in this case versus Jared Rosholt, and I thought that was a risky move. Jared Rosholt, I believe he did have a brother in the UFC. I'm really lacking for his name, but he did submit Chris Lieben with an arm triangle. And, the Rosholts, the whole family, they're really, really good wrestlers. And I had a feeling that Saul Pelele, if he didn't put him away in the first round, he was going to get John Fitched by Jared Rosholt. And sure enough, that's pretty much exactly what happened. Saul Pelele, he's been in the game for a long time. I believe 16 years. He's had a lot of fights. He was in the UFC previously, and I had a chance to see him at a few AFC shows in Melbourne. And, Saul's an impressive guy. He's a physical specimen. I just don't know how refined his game is. And I think there's a few things that he needs to work on. As the fight started, Saul was sitting very low and he was keeping a lot of distance from Jared. But he did eventually get taken down and controlled by Rosholt. In the very end of the first round, he did reverse it, got on top, got in mount. We know Saul he's got very good and thunderous ground and pound. And he basically started swinging for the fences. He pushed Jared away, really started, bringing those hands down. Unfortunately for Soa, the round ended, and I think he did get a couple of shots in at the end of the round. There's a little bit of controversy afterwards. And, even early on in the fight, he almost got submitted by an arm triangle from Jared. So, I think in this case, if I could say things that Saul Pelele needs to work on, it's, he needs to work on his cardio. And I think if anything, Jared needs to work on, it's maybe mix things up a little bit, because to be honest, the crowd wasn't that, excited by this fight.
Absolutely, and difficult to see, a local fighter lose, at home. Now, he didn't have much of a break from from the octagon. Do you think that this could come down to maybe taking this fight a little bit too soon and needing to take a little bit of time after his last fight to sort of get everything in line?
You know, I really disagree. I don't think that's the case. I think a guy like Soa, I don't know what kind of shape he stays in the off-season, but I think generally with fighters, if you're coming off a camp and you have a fight where you don't suffer too many injuries and you keep training, I think generally you're going to be in better shape. We saw it with Chris Lieben. He beat Aaron Simpson and then faced Akiyama. I believe it was 2 weeks apart. And, I think it's one of those things. Anything that you do, the more often you do it, I think the more relaxed and the better you're going to come in. I think, if anything, Soa would have come, really relaxed into this fight, other than the fact that he did have the pressure of obviously fighting in New Zealand. So I think Soa needs to go back to the drawing board, maybe, hit up our boy Mike Swick's gym up in AKA Thailand, and, maybe work on some things. But, to be honest, at the same time, Jared Roshaw, he's a fantastic wrestler, and he's going to do that to a lot of guys in the heavyweight division. So, to a degree, it doesn't surprise me. But I don't think the UFC would be that crash out on Jared. I think he's very similar to a guy like John Madsen, who, he would really decision his guys, a lot of wrestling, he's not a guy that's going to get knockouts and submissions and things like that. And as we've seen in the UFC, they really are turning into the, if you don't knock guys out, if you don't have crazy fights, we don't want you here.
Now, the big main event, Nate Marquardt deciding to go back up to middleweight. James Tahuna deciding to go down to middleweight. These guys have had so many losses back-to-back. Cass, you got some fun facts here for us about the fighters.
Well, this is I think it's the first time that two guys main evented a card who were both coming off losses. Which, it's an interesting fact when you have people saying that there's too many fight cards these days and they're being watered down, etc., etc. And here you have two guys that are basically coming off losses. Now, Tahuna's last win came 497 days ago against Ryan Jimmo, and Marquardt's last win came 716 days ago against Tyron Woodley. Now, Tahuna was coming off two losses to Shogun and Glover. I think both of them in the first round. Glover in the first round pretty quick, and Shogun even quicker via knockout. And then Marquardt was coming off three losses to Tarek Safadine, Jake Ellenberger, and Hector Lombard. And against Jake Ellenberger and Hector Lombard, those were two brutal KOs. So I thought that was quite interesting, given that these guys were main eventing. But of course, James Tahuna, if not Mark Hunt, he's probably the biggest name for New Zealand. And I guess the intriguing thing about this matchup was that Nate Marquardt was obviously going from welterweight back up to middleweight, and James Tahuna was coming from light heavyweight down to middleweight.
Absolutely. We had a very interesting chat with Nate in an earlier episode on our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/submission radio AU. Check it out. He spoke a little bit about going back up to middleweight and how he thinks that, it's the right move for him. And, today's performance, Nate's performance, not today, but during the fight night was quite impressive, wasn't it, Cass?
It was. Coming into this fight, obviously, James Tahuna, he's an athletic guy. He's very strong. But I think a lot of people were a little bit, let's say, mystified by, James Tahuna. And obviously, being an Aussie, of course I'm a fan of his. But I would say Nate Marquardt, people underestimate just how much experience this guy has. I mean, he was the champion in Pancrase. The dude's been in the game for about 20 years. I mean, he's been around a long time. People look at guys like Nogueira and Crocop and say they've been around a long time. Yeah, well, Nate Marquardt's been around pretty much just as long, and he's still fighting in the UFC, which is crazy. Now he's got with those fight years obviously comes a lot of experience. Now, Nate, he has fantastic submissions, and he's got pretty decent wrestling. He's a very, very, well-rounded guy, and he does have knockout power. Now that doesn't bode well for a guy like Tahuna, who does get tagged a lot and who has been out-wrestled in the past. In the Glover fight, Glover had him basically by a front neck lock, and while Tahuna was basically defending himself from the knees, Glover did sink in that guillotine. Now in this fight, it was pretty much the reverse. So James Tahuna Marquardt had James Tahuna. Now while Tahuna was defending that guillotine, he got blasted with a knee very early in the first round, came crashing down. And just before we go into it, let me just say, James Tahuna's entrance with the haka at the start, really cool, really awesome move by the UFC. I'm glad they let that happen. And I like that Nate Marquardt was contributing to the festivities by coming out looking like Tom Hanks from Castaway.
certainly the ginger beard might be a good luck charm for Mark right there.
Yeah, I would say so. James Tahuna, he found a lot. I wouldn't say a lot, but he did find some success against the cage with dirty boxing. Nate Marquardt has been susceptible in the past to getting out dirty boxed against the cage. But, there was a few times where Tahuna, he was too aggressive. He rushed in. He showed, a bit of inexperience, I would say. He went for a takedown. He got reversed. Basically Nate turned out and tripped him, and then again Tahuna came out blasting off the cage and again got reversed, and Nate Marquardt found himself in full mount. And you could really see early on, as soon as Marquardt got in that mount, very slowly, meticulously, he was isolating that arm, doing some damage. And then in the scramble was when Marquardt went for the armbar. And he did say in his post-fight speech, it wasn't part of his game plan. It's just one of those things that happens. And that is exactly what happens when you fight a guy as experienced as Nate Marquardt. He's been drilling these moves so much for so long, for so many years. It's just basically second nature. And I don't think Tahuna underestimated Marquardt at all. I just think it was a really tough fight, and I think if anyone needed the win more, it was Marquardt to stay relevant in any division. James Tahuna, I think they'll keep him around because he is obviously an Aussie. I believe that's 3 losses in a row now to Shogun, to Glover, and now to Nate Marquardt. It's not a good start in the new division, but hey, I mean, not that he's making these excuses. You can always say things about the weight cut, etc., etc. So I think the UFC will definitely give him another shot, and hopefully we'll see him, in the next Australia card.
Nate Marquardt spoke to us about how he thinks going back to middleweight will give him his power back. He felt a little bit too drained at welterweight. How did he look at middleweight? Physically, did he look good? And in terms of stamina, what did you think?
He looked great. He looked really, really great. He had he kept his composure and the pace as only a veteran can. One thing he looked just as big and explosive as he did back in the day in middleweight. The interesting thing is what's he going to do now, and who is he going to fight next? Because the middleweight division has drastically changed since Nate Marquardt was in the division. I don't think he's been in that division for about three and a half years. I think since about 2011, since obviously his exile when he went to Strikeforce. Now, since then, the middleweight division has really opened up. People were saying that it was a division where Anderson Silva basically reigned and he'd cleaned out the division. You've got a murderer's row. I'd say that is probably one of the deadliest divisions in the UFC at the moment, and it's going to be interesting who the UFC matched Nate Marquardt up against. But I'm pretty excited to see if Nate can become great yet again. One thing I wasn't a fan of was Nate Marquardt's post-fight speech. I mean, I like Nate Marquardt, always have. I know you have as well, Dennis. Big fan of Nate Marquardt. I just don't like when someone says that. Obviously he attributed the fight to Jesus Christ and things like that, and he was telling everybody how he died for our sins. That's cool, but sometimes you got to keep your beliefs to yourself a little bit. I respect anyone who's religious. I don't really want anyone shoving anything down my throat though, and telling me who and what people have done for me. I think Nate Marquardt might need to go back to the drawing board as far as his post-fight speeches. But all in all, great win for Nate Marquardt, and I'm really happy for him. I've liked him for a long time, and it's really good to see him back in the win column.
Absolutely great to see. A touted fighter, and a matchup that people are suggesting, perhaps the winner of Brad Tavares and Tim Boetsch. We'll see what happens in the future. And as Chael Sonnen had said, there's a time and a place for talking about your religion, and maybe the octagon is not the best place. But I'm excited to get Nate back on the show, so we're gonna have a chat about it, because as you said, a whole new middleweight division to see him compete against. Now, Cass, what a show we have had. We've had Urijah Faber, Bas Rutten, Paul Daley, and even this New Zealand card. Just discussing it, it's just been an exciting week for us here at Submission Radio.
Yeah, it's been really fun. It's been really awesome. And just letting you guys know, we will be taking a brief hiatus. Flannel Life will be in New Zealand. We're going to be taking a little bit of fun time to do some snowboarding and some fun in the snow. But as always, we will always be around, and there will be still some new content on the channel. We'll be back in about 2 weeks with some sick guests. We've got a lot of things coming up. As always, guys, check us out on Twitter, twitter.com/submissionaus. Obviously, subscribe to the YouTube channel, Submission Radio AU, and check us out on Facebook. And of course, all these episodes can be heard on Stitcher, iTunes, and TuneIn Radio.
That's right, guys. And don't forget, up on the YouTube channel and, of course, Stitcher and iTunes, you can check out our interview with Frankie Edgar. He's got the big fight coming up against BJ Penn. Tough finale. Make sure you check out that interview because Frankie says a lot of interesting things, especially talking about how he'd like to finish BJ in this one. So make sure you check that out. Don't forget to check out our interview with Tito Ortiz. He's got a lot of things to say. So if you haven't checked that one out, make sure you do. And some classic interviews with Ken Shamrock, Bob Sapp, and a whole lot more. So if you get a time, you're feeling a bit bored, jump on the channel. There's a lot of fun stuff to hear there. And we got a lot of fun stuff coming up, as Cass said, when we come back.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. Until then, obviously, UFC Fight Night 44 is coming up. Cub Swanson and Jeremy Stevens. Enjoy, guys. We'll see you back soon, and be safe.